Who are the biggest risers and fallers in week 13 of fantasy football rankings? We're going to talk about 5 different risers and 5 different fallers based on what we just saw in week 12 of the NFL season. And fellas, let's start positive here. Let's start with the risers and talk about a guy we have been waiting for all season. It has been a painful stretch, but finally we got there with Jaylen Waddle. Finished as the wide receiver 3 this last week, caught 8 of 9 targets for 144 yards and a score. How high does this boost Jaylen Waddle in your rankings? How much optimism do you have going for him moving forward, Cameron?
I'm still hesitant because, like you said, it's the first time we've seen it since week 1. If you're watching the film, he looked good, right? It's not like this was fluky. He was open all the time. He was making catches at the catch point. But the issue for me is there's all of a sudden so many mouths to feed in this offense, where before it was just Tyreek Hill and just Jaylen Waddle. And now you get Jonnu Smith, 11 targets this week. Devon Achane, two receiving touchdowns this week. And it's just like, is this something that we can see start to be maintained? You know, Tyreek Hill had kind of a downer of a week. I think he still had 9 targets, still had 5 receptions. But can Jaylen Waddle kind of keep up these big weeks? I don't think we're going to see necessarily this week. I shouldn't say that because it is Miami. So we could see this week again. I don't think this is consistent. I got him probably as a borderline wide receiver 25 to 30. I just need to see it another week with how poor this stretch was leading up to this one.
Yeah, Ty, how in are you on Jaylen Waddle coming back here? Because I'm kind of with Cameron here. He's going to rise in my rankings. There's no question. After a game like this, he's going to rise up in my rankings. But yeah, does he crack that top 25, 30 range for you? Or is he still outside your top 30? Or are you even willing to go higher than that?
I would say it's fringe top 30 for me. Because like you guys said, it has just been a struggle all the way up until this point. It's just good to see that we've got a ceiling with Jaylen Waddle now, because beforehand it was like, can the guy even crack double-digit fantasy points, right? I think the best way to describe Jaylen Waddle for me is that I'm cautiously optimistic. Per next-gen stats, 104 of Jaylen Waddle's yards came against Marcus Jones in coverage. And I don't know if you know who Marcus Jones is, but according to PFF, he's like the 85th ranked corner in terms of coverage this year. So Waddle did take advantage of a good matchup win. I think also next gen stats also said it was on 52% of his routes. So I'm cautiously optimistic that maybe Waddle just took advantage of a really good game. You do just have to be careful that hey, it could be a Jonnu Smith and Tyreek Hill game. It could be a Tyreek and Jaylen Waddle game, right? There's just no way of telling at this point. So again, I think for me, the best way to describe my outlook for Jaylen Waddle, yeah, I'm going to bump him up a little bit because again, there's a ceiling, but I'm just cautiously optimistic.
Going into this week, Josh Larkey had tweeted out, Jaylen Waddle had 33 receptions for 404 yards and a score. Jonnu Smith had 39 receptions for 448 yards and 3 touchdowns. And Devon Achane, 46 receptions for 349 and 3 touchdowns. I mean, Jaylen Waddle was, whether you want to call it relegated to the 4th receiving option on this team, I think it's a little bit blown out of proportion. But I mean, when Jonnu Smith has been getting involved at the level that he has too, that has to mean something for Jaylen Waddle. But I think I'm with you both. I'm probably going to push him inside of my top 30 for this next week against the Green Bay Packers on Thanksgiving Eve. Not Thanksgiving Eve, on Thanksgiving Day in the evening, that night of Thanksgiving. But we'll see with Jaylen Waddle moving forward. He's going to rise up the rankings, but it would not be a surprise in the least to see if he's a faller on next week's episode. Before we move on to our first faller of the week, though, I want to make sure that people know about the giveaway we are running for this Thanksgiving holiday season to show our gratitude for you all. You all have already pushed us right around 2.2K subscribers over on YouTube in we've just moved over to this channel in late July, early August. As our token of gratitude this holiday season, we are giving away a CEEDEE Lamb jersey. All you have to do is sign up for Pikkit with the code FELLAS. Sync your sportsbook account, whether that be a place like Underdog, Prize Picks, if you're on FanDuel, DraftKings, any of those. Sync one of your accounts there. We'll know, and you'll be entered to potentially win a CEEDEE Lamb jersey. Over on Pikkit, you can track all of your picks for the NFL season. One of the best places to do that. Track your record, how much you're actually making, how many units you're up. One of the best places to do that. So again, sign up for Pikkit with the code FELLAS. You'll be entered to win a chance to win a free CEEDEE Lamb jersey. Let's move on to faller number 1, though, fellas. That is Malik Nabers. Week 12 was pretty bad with Tommy DeVito. Caught 6 of 9 targets for 64 yards. He didn't draw a target until the Giants were down 23-0 in this game. It was the first play of the second half that Malik Nabers finally drew a target. This stinks for a guy that we were so optimistic for at the start of the season, and I think I was willing to come somewhere in between of his recent stretch, which was pretty bad, and his start of the season stretch, where he was like a top 10 consensus wide receiver. Where does he fall rest of season for you, Cameron?
It's, we talked about him a lot on our wide receiver rankings video because Ty and I were kind of looking at it. We did the rankings and we realized, went back and we're like, shoot, we both have CeeDee Lamb below Malik Nabers right now. And then we're like, we can't do that because Cooper Rush and Tommy DeVito, even if they're equal, right? CeeDee Lamb is more talented, at least at this point, wide receiver than Malik Nabers is. And so it's just, and we saw it. We saw kind of, that first half of how bad it can be. We did hear him after the game, kind of, you're hoping it's the squeaky wheel get some grease, because he said, hey, it's not the quarterback. He pretty much called out Brian Dable in the play call and saying, this is their fault. It's the organization's fault that we suck. So hopefully that means, getting Dallas, New Orleans, Baltimore, Atlanta, Indy these next couple of weeks, that they're just like, okay, we're just going to make sure he's happy going into next year. I think that's the hope. I still think he's probably cracking my top 20 for sure, maybe creeping up towards top 15, just because we know the volume's probably going to be there, because I don't think they're going to do what they did again this week in the first half. And we just know how talented he is, but the ceiling's gone. That's what Ty talked about last week, was there just isn't that same, you're not going to get 30 points because he's not going to give you, 12 catches for 120 yards and 2 touchdowns. Like, that's just not going to happen. So I think that's gone, but I still think week to week, he's probably, even if for a bad week, he had 12.4 PPR fantasy points.
Ty, where are you at with Malik Nabers, with Tommy DeVito here? Because it's not great. It's just not great. Like, I think Malik Nabers does have a point. I was appalled at how many people on social media when Malik Nabers made that comment of like, why, I don't know, ask the coaching staff why I didn't get the ball. That's a Brian Dable question. Like, the amount of people that are like, yo, chill out. You're a rookie, dude. What is he supposed to say? Do you really want him to sit there and take it on the chin? Like, yeah, I don't know, man. Just wasn't my day today. What do you want Malik Nabers to say? So I'm with you, Cameron. He's falling outside of my top 15 for sure. Does he go any lower than that for you, Ty?
I say like the perfect spot for him is somewhere between wide receiver 18, wide receiver 22, because there are going to be some CeeDee Lamb type games like we saw against Washington where they are just going to get the ball out quick and they are going to target Malik Nabers like they have been ever since like Nabers returned from his concussion. He's been second in first read share. So they are looking his way a ton. Yep. The only problem is just that like they're not going to go downfield. There are no, I doubt there are going to be big plays from Malik Nabers the rest of the year. And if there are, it's after the catch. So I'm not going to completely rule out those kind of plays. But that being said, it's that 18 to 22 range for me, just because the bottom, the bottom could fall out on any given week because it is Tommy DeVito. At the same time, he might give you a wide receiver 15 to 18 performance just because he's going to get 9 catches on 12 targets, but just for like 50, 60 yards.
That's the part that worries me, is that we're not going to get the explosive plays. We're going to talk about another player later that I would love to see them try and implement the same strategy with. I don't know if it would actually be successful, where it is like, get the ball out quick to Malik Nabers, watch him do work after the catch. Like that's what we can hope for at this point. But I also don't know if the Giants are the team I really want to trust to try and do that at the same time. So yeah, Malik Nabers will be outside of all of our top 15s. I think, we're willing to try and hold on to that hope for at least 1 week with Tommy DeVito to see, if he could still squeak into that top 15. But yeah, you know what? It does feel more appropriate that he's somewhere between, the wide receiver 17 and the wide receiver 24 in rankings from here on out. Let's talk about a guy who absolutely exploded this last week though, fellas, because Bucky Irving, Ty, I remember, or Cameron, Cameron and I think it was Cameron and I, where we were talking about the running back rankings, or no, the rest of the season schedules. That's who it was. It was you and I, Ty. And we're like, the Bucs have a great rest of season schedule. Who's it going to be when Mike Evans gets back in the receiving game? Well, it doesn't matter. Bucky Irving caught all 6 of his targets for 64 yards, rushed for 87 yards on 12 attempts for a touchdown as well last week. I mean, he's been phenomenal since week 6, fellas. He's been the running back 10 during that stretch. How high is too high for Bucky Irving? Is he top 10 rest of season? I mean, he's got the phenomenal schedule. If he's going to keep putting up games like this, if he's going to keep getting involved in the receiving game, Cameron, how high is too high?
I think top 10 is too high. I really like Bucky Irving. I just think the issue is you just look at all these running backs right now, right? If we're all healthy, yeah. I mean, I'm just going to read the top running backs just so we know where we're at. You got Saquon, Bijan, Derrick Henry, Joe Mixon, Christian McCaffrey, Devon Achane, Jahmyr Gibbs, Kyron Williams, right? You're not touching any of those guys to move Bucky Irving. And I just listed 8 of them. Then you got Breece Hall, Kenneth Walker, Alvin Kamara, Jonathan Taylor, Josh Jacobs, James Cook, James Conner, Chase Brown, David Montgomery, right? I think he can fall somewhere in that range, but still, I just don't know if it's enough to push him top 10 with all those names listed. I listed out to the top 17 running backs. So I think he's going to be great. And when I say he's top 20, that doesn't mean he's bad. It just means we've got so many running backs right now who are actually producing. I think he can crack top 15, though. Like you said, the schedule is ridiculous. When you get to play Carolina twice, New Orleans and Dallas and Vegas, it's like, okay, that's a cakewalk. And the receiving work's not going away. He outsnapped Rashad White for the first time coming off the bye. He's been insanely efficient. So I would say top 15. I just think there are too many good running backs ahead of him to push him top 10.
I do want to play a name game with Bucky Irving eventually, but Ty, I want to give your thought. Oh no, don't roll your eyes. I want you to get your thoughts in first. I was going to be kind and let you come in with your Bucky Irving thoughts here and give your thoughts on how high is too high for Bucky Irving. But go ahead, start there, and then I'll compile a list of names to play a little name game with.
I think he's a high-end running back too. Like when we finish week 18, we're looking back at least this home stretch of games. I think it's going to be somewhere between 12 and 15 because of the schedule, because of how good he looks on the field as well. I think it's also safe to say that he does have kind of top 10 upside week to week, depending on the right matchup, because, we, as much as we want and think that Alvin Kamara and Bijan Robinson are going to be consistently top 5 running backs every single week, it's not going to happen every single week, right? So I still say high-end running back 2, right? That 12 to 15 range. Fringe top 12, I think, could be another way to explain it. But for the guy that since week 6, right, like you said, Lucas, the running back 10, he's 2nd in missed tackles forced per attempt. He's 6th in yards after contact per attempt as well. And for what we know about this backfield, that they want to ride the hot hand, right? They've said they want to get Sean Tucker more involved. They've got Rashad White already. It's essentially who's going to be the best back, and we're going to ride with them for a game. It's been Bucky so far this year, and I'm not expecting that to really change.
All right, so let's go ahead and play a quick name game with Bucky Irving here. Rest of season. Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, Alvin Kamara, Bijan Robinson, Devon Achane, Jahmyr Gibbs, Joe Mixon.
Jeez. The comments already got mad at us for Joe Mixon once. We can't leave him off.
I'm going down.
At least it was a rough week this week, right? At least he was sub 10 points, all right? Hey, no S-tier running back is sub 10 points. That's all I'm going to say.
What I was really struggling with is that I had skipped over Jahmyr Gibbs in my initial reading. I go, I should go back and read Jahmyr Gibbs. And then I realized I was getting to Joe Mixon. That was going to sound really bad. Anyways, any of those are the top 9. Here, I'll give you the top 10 right now. Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, Alvin Kamara, Jahmyr Gibbs, Bijan Robinson, Devon Achane, Joe Mixon, Breece Hall, Josh Jacobs, Kyron Williams. Those are all the top 10 running backs in current or in total fantasy points this year. Do you prefer Bucky over any of them? I'm going to say no.
No, I would not.
No.
Josh Jacobs is next on the list, who is red hot. Or no, Josh Jacobs is already, sorry, I mentioned him. David Montgomery is next on that list. Bucky Irving or David Montgomery rest of the season?
I'm still going to take Monty just because I know for sure the role, right? I think Bucky's probably got a higher upside, but he's still splitting with Rashad White. And if I'm banking on one of these teams to score more touchdowns, it's the Lions.
Yeah, I would lean Monty too, but we're definitely getting closer here.
Yeah, Monty is my pick as well. Chuba Hubbard or Bucky Irving. Chuba Hubbard is the running back 12 on the season in total fantasy points right now.
Chuba Hubbard.
I'm taking Bucky.
I think I'm gonna go Irving.
I'm gonna go Bucky
but,
on that one.
But it is. I think Chuba's actually kind of showed this last week. Hey, it's still gonna be close because this is still my backfield. So, but I am gonna take Bucky.
James Cook or Kenneth Walker ahead of Bucky, or instead of Bucky.
I think I'm gonna take both over Bucky.
I would take both over Bucky.
Yeah, I would agree.
I think James Cook's actually pretty close, but I was
gonna say I think James Cook is a conversation. Yeah, yep. We won't flush it up. I think James Cook is a conversation. Last three names I'll bring up here: Aaron Jones, James Conner, Chase Brown. That gets us to running back 18.
So I'm taking Chase Brown ahead of him.
I will as well.
I think I'm going to take
James Conner.
I think I'm going to take all three. I do.
I think I would too.
But I think
that schedule for Arizona coming up is so juicy.
It does kind of feel like that's the tier he's in right now, though.
Totally.
Yes.
For me.
Yeah. So we're looking at Bucky ideally somewhere between the running back 15 and 20. Right. Like that's where he's inserted himself now, especially with the juicy schedule he has down the stretch. So yeah, if they continue riding his hot hand and he continues to stay hot, like Bucky could easily be a top 20 guy rest of the season, like you mentioned, Cameron. Mm-hmm. Before we go any further, I want to make sure that people are subscribed over here to our YouTube channel. I mentioned earlier, nearly 2.2 K subscribers here since we launched in late July. We appreciate you all. Some of you might actually be watching our content and realize you're not even subscribed right now. So I want you to take a quick moment. If you're not already, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on that notification bell as well. Promise, you will love the content we are putting out. We are fantasy football content all the time, 3 videos per week. We'll go down to 2 in the offseason, but we're still bringing you plenty of dynasty content, NFL draft content as well. So if you love fantasy football, anything NFL, this is the channel for you. Hit that subscribe button, turn on that notification bell as well, so you know when all of our newest episodes are up. Another faller this week, fellas. Let's talk about DeAndre Swift, because he's a little bit of a fascinating one where you could just chalk this up to the matchup against the Minnesota Vikings, who have just been stellar against opposing running backs this year. DeAndre Swift only had 13 carries for 30 yards, 0 touchdowns. He did catch 3 or 4 passes for 35 yards, but only averaged 2.3 yards per carry. That's his lowest mark since week 3 against the Indianapolis Colts, where he averaged only 1.5 yards per carry. Is this a one-off for DeAndre Swift that you're willing to just right away, or is this something you're actually factoring into his matchup with the Detroit Lions coming up on Thanksgiving?
I mean, yeah, I'm factoring it in. That I think we've been just hinting at this for long enough that if you've been watching us consistently, you should know that we've arrived at when we said you need to sell him by, because we just saw him play Minnesota. He plays Minnesota again in Minnesota. He's got Detroit twice, who just made Jonathan Taylor look like a JV back. And then he's got, San Francisco has been, not unbelievable against the run, but still a tough team. And then he's got Seattle. So he's got maybe 2 decentish matchups, but then 3 really tough matchups coming up and 2 to start your playoffs. So that's really where it comes from, is I just don't see him scoring a lot of touchdowns the rest of the season. And I think his yards are going to be low against these teams who just shut down the run.
Well, and the Minnesota Vikings are just so stifling, man. And even the Detroit Lions, not the same without Aiden Hutchinson, but if you could shut down a back like Jonathan Taylor and your offensive line isn't prepared, they will eat you at the line of scrimmage. They will win that battle no matter what. Yeah. How much is it impacting your rankings,
Ty? Quite a bit. It has to, right? Matchups, and even we've known this about DeAndre Swift too. The touchdowns are not a guarantee, right? I shouldn't say most of his touchdowns, but he's been scoring on breakaway runs. Yes. That's not going to happen every single week, especially with the upcoming schedule. We literally saw it just this past week too with Roschon Johnson. Roschon Johnson got the goal line snap after DeAndre Swift couldn't get in himself. Yeah. And the other thing is too, Roschon got all the 3rd down snaps and 2-minute drills. So it's DeAndre Swift is, we literally highlighted these 6 matchups where he was taking advantage of really, really good matchups. Like you said, Cam, now we are in the bulk of the season, or we are in the home stretch of the season where there are no more good matchups, right? There are no prime matchups. That San Francisco defense, they're figuring some stuff out. The Seattle defense, they're playing a lot better now too. Green Bay's defense playing a lot better. it is ugly for DeAndre Swift the rest of the season.
Yeah, if Roschon Johnson's going to keep taking his work at the goal line too, I mean, that is just absolutely killer for DeAndre Swift, because you can live with the explosive runs, but you have to recognize that's going to be choked out now against some of these really, really good run defenses that are going to key in on that and prevent that specifically. So I agree. I think you get a bad matchup with the Minnesota Vikings, you got to play them again. And you get a Detroit Lions run defense, which, again, not quite as good as Minnesota Vikings without Aiden Hutchinson, but can still shut down running. It has to impact your rankings. You have to have pessimism for DeAndre Swift here moving forward. I don't think you're going to get that, 3-4 week stretch middle of the season where DeAndre Swift was, a consensus top 10 back across the industry. Yeah, your time's up on that. Like you said, Cameron, it was time to move on from that, probably 2 weeks ago before he played the Minnesota Vikings. Let's talk about DJ Moore, though, because he's on the same team and he is 100% a riser. Seven receptions on 7 targets this last week, 106 yards and a touchdown. Had 1 rush attempt for 13 yards, caught a 2-point conversion as well. Finished as the wide receiver 4 here prior to Monday Night Football. Can I go on a little bit of a mini rant here with DJ Moore? Because the stats behind his production are just stupid. So he has 100% catch rate over the last 2 weeks since Thomas Brown took over. 100% catch rate. He's caught all 14 of his targets. He's only running 1.91 yards per route. His average depth of target is only 1.8 yards. He has 143 yards after the catch. They are setting this dude up at the line of scrimmage. Screen plays right over the. Go ahead, DJ Moore, catch it and run with it. Make something happen. And it's freaking working, right? Like, this is what I was listening to the Underdog Football Show this morning. And Aiden said, like, this is what we were promised with Shane Waldron and we literally never got. Well, we're getting it now and they're executing it really, really well. And it's making Caleb Williams a whole lot more comfortable, giving him a lot more confidence as well. So how high are you pushing up DJ Moore now? Because this is back-to-back weeks now. We've seen DJ Moore catch at least 7 targets. This week especially, he exploded. How high are you pushing DJ Moore up in your rankings now? How much confidence does it actually give you?
I think he's a top 24 wide receiver. I think probably even top 20 wide receiver. I think, it's going to be a consistent question for me each week moving forward now, Malik Nabers or DJ Moore.
Ooh.
Especially looking at, that's not a knock on Malik Nabers. He's a fan.
No,
I think NFL wise, right, we're taking Malik Nabers. It's just situation. Tommy DeVito versus, Caleb Williams right now we're looking at. And I think that's where he deserves to be. You look at, Roma Dunze had 10 targets. Keenan Allen had 15. You're like, oh no, is DJ Moore getting phased out? No. DJ Moore only missed 1 snap this week. The one thing, like you said, is we're getting all these screens. Ian Hart has put out in his last 2 weeks with Thomas Brown. He has 9 screens thrown to him, 9 targets, 9 receptions, 117 yards, and a touchdown on those screens.
Yeah.
The next closest player over that stretch is JSN with 4 screen receptions.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they're just everything is designed for DJ Moore. And like you said, it's working. So why would you go away with it, especially when you can't run the ball against teams like we just talked about, Minnesota, Detroit. And so, yeah, I think me and Ty talked about on that wide receiver ranking show again. After those top 12 wide receivers right now, it's getting murky. Of that tier from like 13 to 30 is wide open that you can put guys anywhere. So I could see him, being up in the, DK Terry range in like 2 weeks. We're like, well, duh, he should be here. And then I could also see him being down, and we're talking about him like we're talking about, like a Deebo Samuel or even like Calvin Ridley, Darnell Mooney-ish. So I think he can fall anywhere in those rankings, but I got him top 20, probably 18 to 20-ish.
Where's he at for you, Ty?
Yeah, 18 to 20-ish, 18 to 22 kind of. Yeah, the Malik Nabers question is a perfect one. And like you said too, Cam, about like that wide receiver 13 to 30 range, and like you could order those wide receivers in any kind of way. DJ Moore is like the perfect example of that, because on the year you look at total fantasy points, he's the wide receiver 16. In points per game, he's the wide receiver 36. Like that should just tell you the range of wide receivers that we're talking about here. My concern for DJ Moore, yes, I think putting the role aside, and we're just looking at the Caleb Williams aspect of this. Again, we mentioned with DeAndre Swift, Detroit, San Francisco, Minnesota are the next 3 games on the road, but then you get Detroit, Seattle, and Green Bay to finish it up. The Bears are 0-4 on the road this year. Caleb averages 221 yards a game on the road versus 245 at home. So it's not a huge difference in yardage. But I have to think that because of what Thomas Brown is doing with this offense, that number on the road is going to go up, especially when you're going to get the ball out quick into DJ Moore's hands. There's going to be some more performances like this. He's not going to be the volume hog that I think some people secretly wish that he kind of was in this offense. But at the same time, if they're going to design touches, or if they're just going to call on his name, we're going to take whatever he's going to give us.
Let's take a quick break, fellas. We'll be back with 5 more risers and fallers once we come back. Today's podcast episode is brought to you by our friends over at Underdog Fantasy. Now, we love Underdog. It is the easiest place to play best ball formats, and they even have their own form of player props called Pick'em. You can make up to 20 times your money on a single night by correlating props together. 2 picks will triple your money, 3 will 6 times it, 4 will 10 times it, and 5 plays that all hit will multiply your entry by 20. You can even place insurance on your picks too, so if only 4 of your 5 props hit, you still get 10 times your entry. And if you use our code FELLAS when signing up, Underdog is going to double your first deposit up to $100. Alrighty, we are back. We have discussed 5 different risers and fallers: Jaylen Waddle, Malik Nabers, Bucky Irving, DeAndre Swift, and DJ Moore. Let's start with a faller here on this half of the show, fellas. Jonathan Taylor. You mentioned it when we were talking about DeAndre Swift, Cameron. Unfortunately, it looked like a JV back against the Detroit Lions. 35 yards on 11 attempts this last week. He is now finished as the running back 30 or worse in 3 of his last 4 games. Man, how far do we have to move Jonathan Taylor down our rankings? Because it has not been great. He is getting stuffed on 66.7% of his runs. That is the highest of all running backs with at least 20 rushing attempts since week 8. We need to have a Jonathan Taylor conversation. Does he deserve to be part of this elite tier still, or do we need to move him down? And how far?
Yeah, so the nice thing is he does see New England. He has a bye, Denver, Tennessee, the Giants. So obviously Denver's not going to be a great matchup. They've been rolling. They've been playing well. But what we've seen is when they play a team that's going to put up some points, who plays good running rush defense, he's not seeing the same volume, and they're kind of shutting him down, right? I mean, he had against Minnesota 48 yards. Against the Jets, he had 24 carries and only 57 yards. Last week, 35 yards on 11 carries. Even go back to week 1 against Houston, he only had 48 yards on 16 carries. So like New England, Tennessee's been pretty good on defense, but I just don't think they can put up the points where they're going to abandon the run. And the Giants, I think, are good matchups, but he's probably closer to a top 15 back than he is a top 5 back for sure, right? I mean, he probably isn't almost closer to top 15 than he is top 10, just because, like we said, all these running backs are playing well, they're healthy, and when Anthony Richardson's out there, he doesn't get the PPR upside, and so you're just banking on him breaking off runs, and teams don't respect the pass when Richardson's out there until Richardson can prove, hey, I can hit guys consistently, over the middle or down the field. Wow, boy,
right down the field. Yeah.
But that's my worry, is that he's just going to see stack boxes, moving forward every single week. So if Fantasy Pros has him at 13 rest of the season, and I think that's probably appropriate for where he should be going. Where we should be looking at him for the rest of the year.
He's currently the running back 23 in fantasy points per game this year, averaging only 13.9 points per game. Mm-hmm. You say the running back 13, I say, ooh. And I mean, I think can I say that's salvaged by those matchups that you named?
Yeah, no, 100%.
It might be salvaged by those matchups you named. Because if it wasn't New England and the Giants coming up, I might be willing to push Jonathan Taylor outside of my top 15 running backs, but that might salvage his top 15 status for me.
Yeah.
Does it for you, Ty, or are you willing to go as far as pushing him out of your top 15?
It's tough to do it with the matchup, but the thing is, like, he might just be one of the riskiest running back plays the rest of the year.
Yeah.
Because we saw it against the Jets in the game where the Colts were leading, then we're behind, and then ultimately came back and won the game. The guy got 24 carries, but only went for 57 yards. And then this past week against Detroit, he played 96% of the snaps. He only got 11 carries and he got 0 targets. He's just not involved in the receiving game enough to make up for the lack of touchdowns, the lack of yardage, because the guy also in the last 2 games with Anthony Richardson hasn't had more than 3.2 yards per carry. So he is a very risky play. I'm not a fan. Yeah, the New England matchup and the Giants in week 17. That's really about it, because Denver and Tennessee right off the bye, that is not as great as you would want it to be.
Since week 8, man, this is so brutal. Zone concept. He's 48 rush attempts in zone concept, 18.86% success rate.
Ooh.
You look at, oh my gosh, you look at 41 rush attempts in man and gap concepts. It's a little bit better, but still only a 39% success rate. I mean, it has been ugly for Jonathan Taylor. And like, I want to think this is salvaged in good matchups. I really do. But if they're going to keep forcing him into stack boxes and teams are just going to make Anthony Richardson beat them, like this Colts offensive line is not holding up to give Jonathan Taylor enough holes to burst off any explosive runs here. So, man, it's because of the matchups and the talent I know Jonathan Taylor has that he'll probably stay inside of my top 15. But, you know, if he struggles against New England or against the Giants, I mean, it might be Jover that for Jonathan Taylor this season, honestly.
Yeah, the issue is, I think he's what our worry was Derrick Henry would be at the beginning of the season.
1,000%. Yes.
Where he is completely game script dependent. And we were, it was, is Lamar going to stretch the field enough where teams aren't just like, hey, we're going to just stack the box consistently. Obviously, we knew Lamar was head and shoulders ahead of Anthony Richardson. But, when you have Derrick Henry and Lamar back there, it begs the question, your team's just going to just make sure you can't beat him on the run. Well, that's what they're doing with Indianapolis because they can't. So I think that's really where he's gotten into. And that's why you're seeing 8-9 point games if he doesn't score a touchdown or if he really doesn't break out running the ball. In this last week, 3.5 was just killer. Trust me. I'm feeling it for sure.
I can speak as a manager.
Yes.
I will say I did bring up Jonathan Taylor as a potential league loser to start the season. So I did mention him in our league losers episode. So I'll go ahead and I'll give myself a pat on the back and ignore the fact that I agreed with Ty on Derrick Henry. We'll keep it moving here, though. Hey, that wasn't a shot at you, Ty. I said I agreed with you. I said
you just didn't need to bring it up. That was so unnecessary. You didn't need to drag me down with you.
We were all thinking it.
Look,
move on.
A guy who's been crushing it recently, though, is Josh Jacobs. Running back 2 this last week. 26 attempts for 106 yards. Battled with cramps throughout the game. Still put up 3 tutties. He has now scored 20-plus fantasy points in 4 of his last 5 games. I mean, he has been on an absolute roll since week 8, fellas. I mean, Josh Jacobs, is he top 5 back rest of season? Top 7 back rest of season? At least against the Miami Dolphins here in week 13 on Thanksgiving night. How high is he going in your rankings? I mean, this is top 5 consideration for me for sure.
For this next week, you're asking?
Yes.
Yeah.
For this next week. Let's talk next week before we get too far rest of season.
I think you got to consider him top 5, especially the role he's been on. There's a reason, though, when me and Ty were doing our trade videos, he was probably on every other one of them because it was, look at what he's doing on the ground, right? We saw 84, 151, 73, 62. Like, he was being consistent on the ground. He just wasn't finding the end zone. Now, all of a sudden, he scored in 3 of the last 4 weeks, double-digit touchdowns in 3 of the last 4 weeks. Or actually, he scored 4 of the last 5 weeks.
4 of the last 5 weeks.
And so we're just finally seeing the fantasy points come from where their production has been. So like you said, I think he probably is top 7 next week. Maybe you can sneak him up to top 5. It does get a little harder when you got Detroit week 14, Minnesota week 17.
Yeah.
But Seattle, New Orleans at the same time, I think he's going to eat in those matchups. And so, yeah, I think he's a top 10 back for sure rest of the season. That's where I'm going to have him. But he does have 2 difficult matchups mixed in there.
Yeah, let's keep our lens against the Miami Dolphins, because I do want to make sure we keep our lens a little bit here on week 13. We've drifted a little bit out rest of season, trying to figure out where these guys fit in, but let's focus on week 13 against Miami. Ty, where is he for you? Is he top 7 or top 5 or top 3?
I mean, he's got to be top 5. I mean, pushing top 3, I would say too. I mean, The thing is though, I mean, everyone is playing in week 13. Right, so we are getting Bijan, we are getting Alvin Kamara back, we are getting some studs at running back this week. But is there a hotter running back right now than Josh Jacobs? There is not. So no. I think you absolutely right. Duh. But
I'm not going to ignore. I'm not going to ignore his week 12.
He's not in those conversations.
Now,
those conversations.
300 all-purpose yards. I do that in Madden, actually. Yeah. So, like, how hard is it really? I'm kidding. Yeah, Josh Jacobs should be top 5 in a game too, where I think we all are expecting Green Bay to, I'm not going to say dominate, but we all know that like Miami does not do well in these colder climates. It is well documented. So I think with Green Bay playing with the lead majority of this game, they're going to continue to rely on Josh Jacobs. Yeah, he's got to be top 5.
Another faller that we got to make sure to talk about here, fellas, Marvin Harrison Jr., another young rook, another top 10 pick in the NFL draft this year. He was the wide receiver 46 in week 12, catching 3 of 6 targets for 47 yards. This is not the post-bye rookie bump that we were hoping for in a plus matchup here with the Seattle Seahawks. He has now caught 3 or less passes in 6 of 11 games this year. It's averaging less than 50 receiving yards per game. This is the ultimate question, though. How far are you actually dropping Marvin Harrison Jr. in your rankings when he gets the Minnesota Vikings coming up this week? That's my question here. We could talk about him as a faller, but is this also one of those games where we push him down too far in the rankings, then he has a great game against Minnesota? Like, how much does this upcoming matchup with the Minnesota Vikings in week 13 factor into your ranking for him this week?
I mean, it has to a little bit, right? Because we've seen everybody perform pretty well against the Vikings, but
almost everybody has, except for the Jacksonville Jaguars. But Mac Jones will Mac Jones.
Yeah.
But continue.
But I don't know if I can put him inside the top 24. I think at this point he's got to be similar to Jaylen Waddle, because he's not just having bad weeks. He's killing you. He's had in games where he's played, more than 70% of snaps. He's had 0.9, 4.6, 3.6, 2.4, and 6.2. That's not just like, oh man, that stinks. That's like, oh shoot, I had pretty much a non-factor in one of my positions that I'm counting on to be a wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2. So I got to think he's probably he's 25 to 30 for me, even with a great matchup this week.
So last week in our consensus rankings, Marvin Harrison Jr. came in as the wide receiver 18. I assume you got it. I can't even say I assume. I'm going to be honest. He's probably going to sit around there for me this week because he plays the Minnesota Vikings. Who doesn't eat against the Minnesota Vikings? That's my gripe here is we can push him down, but how far are you pushing him down from wide receiver 18, Ty? I mean, he was your wide receiver 21 going into last week. But are you pushing him lower than that?
I have to be completely honest with you, because this offense, I think part of the intrigue from Marv going into the season, right, with the draft capital, with the talent, you're like, this offense is going to heavily rely on Marvin Harrison Jr. They have not. They have needed just big plays from him. So to me, he's a flex play rest of the year. He's a wide receiver 3 kind of player. And the thing is, wide receiver 41 on a per game basis this year, there is an argument too that he can't be played, because there is just no way of knowing he's going to give me 16 or he's going to give me 2. You just have no way of telling. You feel better about it this week against Minnesota, right? Because Minnesota's secondary They do allow some big explosive plays. Like we literally saw Nick Westbrook-Ikine of all wide receivers house one from 98, right? So you feel a little more optimistic with the matchup against Minnesota, but if you are expecting a guaranteed hit from Marvin Harrison Jr. this week, we got to lower expectations then.
If he flops against Minnesota this week, then we are absolutely pushing him down in our ranking. Then I will push him down in my rankings. He's probably still going to slide into the top 20 for me, because I also don't want to be the guy who pushes Marv outside of wide receiver 2 status against a secondary that is allowing the second most fantasy points per game. They're second in yards, targets, and receptions allowed to wide receivers, 29th in schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed to the. I mean, they're getting chewed up left and right. They're allowing the 4th most explosive plays in the league this year. I mean, that I don't know if I can push them outside of my top 20 against the Minnesota Vikings. Maybe, but I don't think I can do it. I don't think I'm quite there. Not against the Vikings, with knowing how bad the secondary is.
Yeah, that makes sense. But it's just, I don't know. It's been so gross.
It has. No, there's no excusing it either. I mean, plus matchup against Seattle, you'd think this team should have a solid outing.
Yeah.
I don't know if we want to write it off, though. It was double XP weekend on COD, so maybe.
Did you see Seattle's tweet?
I did. Yeah.
Oh, the tweet just throwing the shade. They got to play him in 2 weeks too. So if he does not bounce back against Seattle in 2 weeks, I mean, and they can throw something else again at him, oh, that's gonna be just something to watch.
Can we also just put this out there, right? Ever since week 5, right, when this kind of inconsistency and really, really bad weeks from Marv started, he's gone San Francisco, Green Bay, the Chargers, Dolphins, Chicago, the Jets, Seattle. You would think that like the Seattle matchup was probably the best one out of the bunch, but all those other matchups are really good secondaries. So like,
right,
you could use that as a cop out for Marv, but man, it's so unpredictable that you honestly have like no idea how to feel about it.
This is the Vikings matchup is the one that I wish they would have gotten right away out of the bye, because that would have told me a lot about how Marv's second half of the season is going to go. If it's going to be this prime matchup against an exploitable secondary, if Marv can come out of the bye, draw 10 targets, go for 80 something yards and a touchdown as well, like that's the game we're all looking for. That's all we're asking for out of the guy. You would have liked that against Seattle, but this is one where I'm like, I just don't want to get cute when it's the Minnesota Vikings, and you should be willing to start Marv in this matchup as a wide receiver too. I feel like that's where I land. We can agree to disagree on that, but instead let's here's what I'll say. If you do have a question about Marv, if you're like us and you're still trying to figure out where you actually stand on Marv, head over to our Discord. We got 4,500 people over there waiting to help you out with your fantasy football questions. Start sit questions. Your trade deadline is probably closed in your league, so unfortunately no more trade advice, but waivers are still running hot. We're going to have some important waiver wire pickups here in the next few weeks, most likely. So if you have any questions on who to drop, who to start, head over to our Discord. We got a whole community over there waiting to help you win your league this year. We need to have a conversation about Jaxon Smith-Njigba, fellas.
Yes, we do.
Cameron's been waiting for this. We've held off too long all episode to talk about JSN. Finished as the wide receiver 13 this week. Caught 6 of 7 targets for 77 yards and a score. The advanced metrics on him over the last 3 weeks are just stupid. They're so stupid. Okay. I hate doing vomit stat reads at the top of a segment, but some of these are just stupid. He's drawn a 31% target share over his last 3 contests, which is second to only Malik Nabers. His fourth in air yard share, 45.7% of his team's air yard share. Second place is DK Metcalf at 50.5. And he's also got a 36% first read share, which is 7th in the league. I mean, it is just stupid what JSN is doing over his last 3 contests. I know DK Metcalf is just returning from injury. This has become, is it 1A, 1B? with him and DK Metcalf. DK is, I think, still the 1A, but I'm not ready to call it 1-2. I'm ready to call it 1A, 1B with him and JSN, Cameron.
Yeah, I think he's officially passed up on Tyler Lockett.
Oh,
And I think,
he's buried.
Yes. And I think the reason it's going to feel like that is they are in such a pass happy offense.
Yes.
Where guys are both going to get consistent volume. They're going to get consistent targets. And, JSN is, I sent you guys the next gen stats chart this morning, and he was used a lot more around the line of scrimmage this last week. Whereas when DK Metcalf was out, he was used a little more down the field. Right. I think that he's just going to see more volume than DK will. I think DK though is going to continue to see those higher efficiency down the field, red zone targets that JSN might not. Although JSN did score a touchdown this last week,
right?
So I do think it's going to be very close fantasy wise for the rest of the season. And I think a lot of that just has to do with how much this team is throwing overall.
Where are you at with JSN, Ty? Cameron and I are both. I know I stat vomited and asked a question. I'm very much in on JSN. I think this is what we've been waiting for, and I'm not going to question it. I'm just going to ride this thing out to the end of the season because I do think JSN is establishing himself as that dude in Seattle alongside DK Metcalf.
I don't want to go verbatim what I said before we started because I need to word it differently. I think it's the best way to say it. The 13 target, 11 targets that he got. I know the 11 targets last week in San Francisco was when DK was also active. Scratch all that. Here's what I'm
tell us what. Quit trying to word your way around it. Let it out.
It's for how often where he's targeted near the line of scrimmage. If we don't get a touchdown from the guy, I'm worried that we're going to see that we're going to just keep seeing 6 for 70 yards, which if he's going to give you 13, I think there are much worse options out there. I think my concern is I don't know what the week to week ceiling is for JSN because of the DK Metcalf component, I'm not sure how often he's going to get fed. The Jets, Arizona, Green Bay, and his next 3, there's some opportunity there, but I don't know how to classify JSN. I don't know if I can call him a volume hog. I don't know if I can call him I just struggled to make up my mind. But what I do know is that he's coming through in fantasy, so I'm not really going to doubt it. And because of that, he is going to rise in my rankings. Absolutely, he has to. But it's one of those, I need to take a deeper look on film. I need to take a deeper look on just, again, game without DK Metcalf and the 13 targets versus with DK Metcalf. What are the differences? Do I feel comfortable with the difference now with DK Metcalf in the offense?
So JSN just this last week ran 2.66 yards per route. His ADOT was only 1.7 yards though. So his average depth of target was just over 1.5 yards. I'm curious what his yards after catch was though. That's the number. Yeah. I mean, he was third in the league in yards after catch this week with 65. So they're actually allowing him to make plays after the catch as well. So this is one of those where I don't want to just prescribe low average depth of target equals potential less yards. I think JSN is skilled enough of a player to be a high quality yards after catch DJ Moore kind of player, right? That's what I think you're hoping for rest of the way if this trend continues. I understand the concern around that though, right? It's not this big splashy play. It's not, your alpha wide receiver 1 kind of usage where you're running crossing routes over the middle, dig routes, right? Everything of the sorts. I understand it's going to be closer to the line of scrimmage, but if they're going to allow him to make plays with his legs after the catch, I'm still very optimistic for JSN going forward in that regard.
I think just looking at the 2 games between DK and JSN in JSN's, breakout honestly in the last 2 weeks, they are identical. They have the exact same first read share. So it's not like one is getting these, insane opportunities or getting more design, they are kind of even in terms of just how this offense wants to get them the ball. So yeah, if you're going to bank on the after the catch ability of JSN, he is very good after the catch. Do not get me wrong.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you said, the big play, the downfield plays, the volume, and all those kind of things. If that's what you're expecting out of JSN, I think you need to just shift perspective a bit on that.
Let's wrap it up here. Unfortunately, one more faller, so we get our even 5-5 to close out the episode here, fellas. Jayden Reed of the Green Bay Packers. Been on a little bit of a downslide here. Caught all 3 of his targets for 26 yards this last week. Only good for the wide receiver 56, though. He only has 1 finish inside of the top 40 wide receivers in his last 5 games. He has now caught 3 or less passes in 4 of his last 5, under 40 receiving yards during that stretch in 4 of his last 6 games. But we have to acknowledge Romeo Doubs is likely going to be out on a short week with a concussion. I'm guessing he's not going to clear protocol by Thursday. And his 1 game without Romeo Doubs in week 5, caught 4 of 6 targets for 78 yards. Did have 2 rush attempts for 19 yards, but he finished as the wide receiver 25 on the week with 13.7 fantasy points. What's the appropriate balance here with Jayden Reed? You get the Miami Dolphins, who are a tough secondary. No 2 ways around it. But without Romeo Doubs, there's argument that the utilization is going to go up, where Jayden Reed isn't just seeing 3-4 targets. He's seeing 6, 7, 8 targets in this game. So where's the balance here with Jayden Reed in terms of, is he actually a faller, or is he kind of a net neutral without Romeo Doubs? Where's the balance for you, Cameron?
I see him as a net neutral. The way that this offense has moved in the past as Dontavian Wicks enters the Romeo Doubs role, Christian Watson stays on the outside. And so I just don't know if he's going to see more volume. So what you're hoping for now is if Doubs misses when Doubs misses this next week, is that they have more designed plays for Jayden Reed. I think that's the big hope, is that, okay, we're going to give him an extra 2 plays, because that's what killed him. He's only had 1 game with more than 6 targets so far this year. He's only had 3 games with more than 5 or more receptions so far. Jayden Reed, honestly, is very similar to Jameson Williams from the Detroit Lions, in the fact that he only has 3 games in the top 24 right now. His only games where he's been pretty decent for fantasy, his yards per reception are 19, 22, 27, and 34. So he just needs the big play, and he needs the touchdown, because over the last 2 weeks against Chicago and San Francisco, he's had five receptions for 5 targets and under 50 receiving yards. So it's just, the floor is so low. And obviously, we saw it week 1 with the ceiling, week 4 against Minnesota. And now that I'm talking down about him, we'll probably see it in week 13 against Miami. But you just need that big play. And that's kind of who Jayden Reed has become, playing, between 55 and 75% of snaps.
Where are you at with Jayden Reed, Ty? I can't figure out where I actually lie with him this week, because on the one hand, I think the utilization does go up. I think you're going to see more designed plays for Jayden Reed without a Romeo Doubs. But at the same time, Jayden Reed could also only draw 5 targets in this game. And, Josh Jacobs has 20 to 25 carries, and, they're not throwing the ball as much. So where are you at with Jayden Reed? Where do you lie?
I don't think it's a coincidence that since week 7, right, when Josh Jacobs really started to roll as the running back 2 in points per game, we've seen Jayden Reed fall to the wide receiver 59 in points per game. They just don't need to take as many deep shots. They don't need, they will continue to run 3 wide receiver sets. I think this is according to Sumer Sports on the year. Gosh, I had it, and they took it away from me. But they are top 10 in 3 wide receiver set usage. So Jayden Reed is not a full-time player. If they're not going to take as many deep shots, like you said, Cam, that is where he has come through pretty much all year. As long as Josh Jacobs continues to be as hot as he is, I just don't think Jayden Reed is really going to be that consistent fantasy piece that you had him as at the beginning of the season. He's probably kind of a boom bust flex play at this point in the year. And until further notice, the floor is going to be scary low for Jayden Reed.
That's the part that scares me is I think he's going to keep falling in my rankings because the floor is so low. And even if Romeo Doubs is out, I don't think it's not a world beating piece enough to move him up. Be like, oh, it wouldn't be like Jordan Addison without Justin Jefferson, or, TJ Hawkinson without Justin Jefferson, or T Higgins without Jamar Chase, right? It's not that much of a leap, right? Where it's like, well, yeah, of course we're going to push T Higgins into top 10 status. In this case, it's like, okay, maybe Jayden Reed comes up 3 spots in my rankings, but is that just wiped out by the Miami Dolphins defense? Yeah. You made a face, Ty, as I was in the middle of talking there. It looks like you stumbled on something.
Yeah. So back to this 3 wide receiver usage in Green Bay. They are bottom 5 in pass rate from 3 wide receiver sets. So it's not even a guarantee that when Jayden Reed gets on the field that they're actually going to throw the ball. They have more reason not to throw the ball right now, especially with how well Josh Jacobs is playing. So I don't want, again, I've made that sound very, very contingent on on Josh Jacobs and how well he's doing. But at the same time, for a guy that's not getting on the field all the time, that needs big plays, it's a risky play every single week.
Yeah, Jacobs has 6 games so far with 18 plus carries. And only one of those games, Reed's played over 60% of snaps. So if it is a Josh Jacobs week, Reed's not even on the field.
Right.
Well, we'll put a bow on it there. 10 risers and fallers in week 13 fantasy rankings. Look, again, if you want a chance at winning a CeeDee Lamb jersey this Thanksgiving season, make sure you go visit our friends over at Pikkit. Sign up with the code fellas, sync that sportsbook account, whether it's your Underdog account, Prize Picks account. We'd love it if it's Underdog, because Underdog is a very big supporter of us here at the fellas. But all you gotta do is sync your account over there. We'll make sure you get entered into a drawing to potentially win a CeeDee Lamb jersey. Make sure you track all of your picks this season over on Pikkit. Keep track of where you are thriving with your NFL picks this year. We'll be back one more show tomorrow on Wednesday. That'll be our 16 to 24 players who will change your week 13 outcome. Our starts and sits episode per usual. You can follow the fellas accounts on Twitter, FF Fellas on Twitter, the FF Fellas on Instagram, Fantasy Football Fellas on Facebook and TikTok. I am at Lucas Wenzel on Twitter, Camlaw FFF for Cameron, Tyler_Plath for Tyler. Cameron, are you on that Blue Sky thing yet?
No, I'm not.
Okay, you haven't made the jump yet. So many people, I still laugh at that one comment in our live. What a WTF is Blue Sky? Clearly not everybody has made the jump yet. But if you want the old Twitter, it's over on Blue Sky. Tyler and I can be found at our same handles over there as well. Again, make sure you subscribe, turn on those notifications so you know when our video is up tomorrow, when you know when all of our future content is up as well. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy. See you soon. Deuces.
Deuces.